You're listening to Everything Out There with your host, Steve Stockton.
Hello, friends. Now, the legend of Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, has captivated the imaginations of people around the world for centuries. Described as a large, hairy, ape-like creature inhabiting remote forests, Bigfoot has become an enduring mystery and a subject of intense speculation. Despite numerous reported sightings, footprints, and eyewitness accounts, the existence of Bigfoot remains unproven. This episode will explore the history, cultural significance, alleged evidence, and scientific perspectives surrounding the elusive creature known as Bigfoot. The origins of Bigfoot can be traced back to the indigenous peoples of North America, who, for centuries, have shared tales of large, wild, hairy beings that inhabit the dense forests. Various Native American tribes have different names and interpretations of this creature, emphasizing its cultural significance. The term Sasquatch, for example, itself is derived from the Halkomelem language spoken by indigenous peoples in the Pacific Northwest. The first recorded encounters with a creature resembling Bigfoot in mainstream Western culture occurred in the 19th century. Early European settlers in North America began reporting strange encounters with large, hairy creatures, and stories of such encounters spread across the continent. These accounts laid the foundation for the modern-day legend of Bigfoot. Bigfoot has become deeply ingrained in popular culture, transcending its origins in Native American folklore. The creature has inspired a plethora of books, movies, documentaries, and television shows. From the famous Patterson-Gimlin film, shot in 1967, to reality TV series like Finding Bigfoot, the legend of Bigfoot has permeated various forms of media, making it a cultural icon. The allure of Bigfoot lies in its mysterious nature and the sense of adventure associated with the quest for an elusive, undiscovered creature. Bigfoot has become a symbol of the untamed wilderness and the unknown, tapping into humanity's primal fear and fascination with the wild. One of the most cited pieces of evidence supporting the existence of Bigfoot is the discovery of large human-like footprints in remote areas. These footprints, often measuring between 15 to 24 inches in length, have been found in various locations around the world, with some instances dating back over a century. While many of these prints can be attributed to hoaxes or misidentification of animal tracks, some remain unexplained, fueling speculation about the creature's existence. Sightings of Bigfoot have been reported across North America, with witnesses describing a creature standing between 7 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark fur, and possessing a distinctly ape-like appearance. However, skeptics argue that many of these sightings can be attributed to misidentifications of known animals, such as bears or large primates. In addition to both footprints and sightings, witnesses have reported hearing mysterious vocalizations in areas associated with Bigfoot sightings. These alleged sounds include howls, grunts, and screams that are often described as unlike any known animal. Researchers and enthusiasts alike claim that these vocalizations provide further evidence of Bigfoot's existence, while critics argue that they could be attributed to other animals or even human activities. Despite the wealth of anecdotal evidence and the passionate efforts of Bigfoot researchers, the scientific community remains largely skeptical about the existence of Bigfoot. The lack of conclusive physical evidence, such as a body or skeletal remains, has been a significant hurdle for those advocating for Bigfoot's reality. Critics argue that many purported pieces of evidence, including footprints and photographs, can be explained through natural process, hoaxes, or misinterpretations. The scientific method demands verifiable, repeatable evidence, and until such evidence is presented, mainstream science is unlikely to accept Bigfoot as a valid biological entity. One of the challenges in studying Bigfoot scientifically is the lack of a clear hypothesis about the creature's biology and behavior. Proponents of Bigfoot's existence often struggle to provide a consistent and testable model for the creature's physiology, habitat, and ecological role. Skeptics and researchers alike have proposed various explanations for Bigfoot sightings and evidence. Some suggest that witnesses may be encountering misidentified animals, such as bears or large primates, as I stated earlier. Others argue that hoaxes, whether intentional or unintentional, play a significant role in perpetuating the myth of Bigfoot. Throughout history, there have been numerous instances of individuals creating fake footprints, photographs, and even elaborate hoaxes to attract attention or perpetuate the legend of Bigfoot. These hoaxes, combined with the limitations of eyewitness testimony and the human tendency to perceive patterns in random stimuli, contribute to the difficulty of separating fact from fiction in the study of Bigfoot. While the debate over Bigfoot's existence continues, the legend has had a tangible impact on the areas associated with sightings. Bigfoot hotspots, such as the Pacific Northwest and parts of the Appalachian Mountains, have become tourist attractions, drawing enthusiasts and curious visitors alike. Local economies have capitalized on the creature's mystique, with businesses selling Bigfoot-themed merchandise and offering guided tours. In some cases, the legend of Bigfoot has also played a role in conservation efforts. The idea of an undiscovered large mammal roaming the wilderness has led to increased interest in preserving the habitats where Bigfoot is said to reside. Conservation organizations have used the creature's legend to raise awareness about the importance of protecting these ecosystems and the biodiversity they contain. The legend of Bigfoot continues to captivate the public's imagination, blending folklore, mystery, and the primal fear of the unknown. While countless sightings, footprints, and vocalizations have been reported, the scientific community remains unconvinced, demanding verifiable evidence before acknowledging the existence of such a creature. Despite the skepticism, the cultural impact of Bigfoot persists, turning the elusive creature into a symbol of the wilderness and a source of fascination for generations to come. Whether Bigfoot is a mythical creature born from folklore or an undiscovered species waiting to be revealed, the legend endures, leaving the world to wonder what secrets the dense forest might still conceal. Another cryptid we'll be discussing tonight is the Dogman. Now, in the realm of cryptozoology, a field dedicated to the study of creatures whose existence has not been proven by mainstream science, the Dogman stands as a mysterious and elusive figure. Described as a creature with the body of a man and the head of a canine, the Dogman has become the subject of numerous reports, sightings, and speculative theories. In this episode, we'll also delve into the origins of the Dogman legend, its cultural significance, alleged encounters, and the scientific perspectives surrounding this enigmatic creature. Much like Bigfoot, the origins of the Dogman legend can be traced back to American folklore, particularly in the Midwest, where tales of encounters with a humanoid creature possessing canine features have circulated for decades. One of the earliest and most well-known incidents dates back to 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan. The incident involves two lumberjacks who claimed to have encountered a creature with the body of a man and the head of a dog, sparking the beginning of the Dogman legend. These early accounts were often shared through the oral tradition, contributing to the legend's evolution over time. In the 1980s, the legend gained wider recognition through the song "The Legend" by Steve Cook, broadcast on a Michigan radio station. This song recounted the alleged events in Wexford County and further fueled interest in the Dogman, leading to an increase in reported sightings and encounters. Similar to other cryptids like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, the Dogman has become ingrained in popular culture, inspiring a range of creative expressions. The creature has appeared in various forms of media, including literature, art, music, and television. The Dogman's dual nature, Combining humanoid and canine features adds an element of horror and fascination to its portrayal, making it a popular subject in horror stories and urban legends. The Dogman has also found a place in local folklore, becoming a symbol of the unexplored and mysterious aspects of the natural world. Communities with reported Dogman sightings often embrace the legend as part of their cultural heritage, organizing events, festivals, and even creating local businesses centered around the creature. The legend of the Dogman has, therefore, become a cultural touchstone, blending folklore with a modern fascination for the unknown. Reports of Dogman encounters typically describe a creature standing upright on two legs, possessing a muscular and humanoid body, but with a distinctively canine head. Witnesses often mention sharp teeth, pointed ears, and glowing or reflective eyes. The size of the creature is reported to vary, with some accounts describing a relatively small creature, while others depict a towering figure reaching heights of 7 feet or more. One of the most famous alleged encounters with the Dogman occurred in 1961 in Paris, Michigan. The witness, Robert Fortney, claimed to have seen a creature resembling the Dogman while on a camping trip. Fortney reported that the creature circled his campsite and emitted a guttural growl before disappearing into the darkness. This account, along with others, has contributed to the mystique surrounding the Dogman and has led to the creation of a community of enthusiasts and researchers dedicated to investigating the phenomenon. The scientific community largely dismisses the existence of Dogman, attributing reported sightings to misidentifications, hoaxes, or simply the influence of popular culture. Skeptics argue that eyewitness testimony is inherently unreliable, often influenced by preconceived notions, fear, or external factors. Additionally, the lack of physical evidence, such as remains, DNA samples, or clear photographs, poses a significant challenge to those advocating for the reality of the Dogman. Cryptozoology, the field that studies creatures like the Dogman, is often criticized for its reliance on anecdotal evidence and its departure from the rigorous scientific method. The burden of proof rests on those claiming the evidence of such creatures, and until verifiable evidence is presented, mainstream science will remain skeptical. Skeptics and researchers propose several explanations for reported Dogman encounters. One common suggestion is that witnesses may be encountering known animals, such as large canids, wolves or coyotes, bears, or even misidentified humans. The human tendency to perceive patterns and familiar shapes, known as pareidolia, could also contribute to the misinterpretation of ordinary objects or animals as something more mysterious. Hoaxes are another prevalent aspect of the Dogman phenomenon. The allure of perpetuating a cryptid legend, gaining attention, or simply having a bit of fun has led some individuals to create elaborate hoaxes, including staged photographs, fictional eyewitness accounts, and even fabricated physical evidence. These hoaxes not only muddy the waters for legitimate researchers, but also contribute to the skepticism surrounding the Dogman. While the scientific community remains unconvinced, the legend of the Dogman continues to thrive in popular culture, manifesting in various forms of entertainment. Books, movies, documentaries, and podcasts explore the myth, contributing to its perpetuation and the ongoing fascination with cryptids. Communities associated with reported Dogman sightings have embraced the legend, incorporating it into local lore and tourism. Festivals, guided tours, and events centered around the creature attract both enthusiasts and curious visitors, injecting economic vitality into these regions. The legend of Dogman stands as a testament to humanity's enduring fascination with the mysterious and unknown. Rooted in American folklore and perpetuated through the decades, the Dogman has become a cultural icon, inspiring creativity, speculation, and a sense of wonder. While the scientific community remains skeptical and emphasizes the need for verifiable evidence, the legend persists, leaving us to ponder the thin line between myth and reality. Whether the Dogman is a creature that eludes scientific understanding, or merely a product of human imagination. Its impact on culture and the enduring allure of the unknown continue to shape our perception of the cryptid world. Hello again, and welcome back to Everything Out There. Steve Stockton here with you. Tonight, joining me on the phone is Darrell Denton, a friend of mine, runs Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures group on Facebook. Darrell, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Steve. Honored to be on here with you, brother. Thanks for asking me.
Oh, excited to have you here. I'm a member of your group. I think I'm an admin over there, and I believe
Yeah.
you tagged me as a
Yeah.
group expert. I don't know about that, but
Well, we all know there is no expert. It's just a technical phrase that Facebook allows us to use. So
yeah, usually if I hear somebody introduced as an expert, I go the other way because you can't be an expert in stuff that you don't have proof for necessarily. Now, I've had some experiences and stuff myself, and I've studied this stuff since years, since the late 60s, early 70s. And I've
I
got
know I've
more.
been a huge fan for a long time. I can't remember. I know that yours was about the first one I started listening to years ago, however many that was, but still
Yeah,
still my favorite one. And I
I
don't mind saying
appreciate that,
that.
Daryl. And yeah, I just, had an interest in the strange, the paranormal, and the unusual from early childhood due to some experiences I had, and then got into the cryptids probably early 70s when I was still small, still in the single digits, and just kind of lights me up. And I've had, just a lifetime of that. And I've lived in the Pacific Northwest and uh, had some experiences out there and some almost sightings. So one time, I'll talk about that one later. But what was your experience? What got you into to Bigfoot and other cryptids and creatures?
Well, I was growing up in Tennessee. I hunted a lot. I was any kind of whatever season was over, me open. I mean, me, my dad, my brothers, or my even my granddad or my uncles. We always hunted. That was just part of growing up there. It was part of the life we lived, and I never really. I believe that possibly things lived. I just didn't think we had any large creatures like a Bigfoot in Tennessee, but that's what got me in. In November of '92, I was at my grandfather's farm where I'd hunted all my life. And it was a pretty large farm. And when his farm ended, he had close friends that joined his farm, and I could hunt there too. They didn't care, they didn't mind at all. And in November the 6th of 1992, I was in my tree stand, and this monster came out of a big cane thicket on the creek riverbank. And that's what got me started in it. Just literally scared me to death. Took me about 6 or 7 years to get over that. So that's what got me into it.
Now, this monster, as you described it, you think it was a Bigfoot, or sometime it was a Dogman, some kind of bipedal creature, or what was your impression of it?
Oh no, it was definitely a Bigfoot, and I did a lot of research on it after that happened. And there wasn't a lot to research in '92. I don't even think I had a cell phone then, but there wasn't any Google or computer stuff that I knew how to operate, or never really knew anybody that had one. So I mainly spent my time at the libraries and stuff trying to find pictures of this thing I'd seen. And my granddad told me when I ran back to the house, terrified. It was a good ways from where I'd hunted at before there. It was like 2 or 3 hollows over. And it was a lot deeper in where I had not hunted before. And he told me what I'd seen. He called it a wood booger, and I'd never heard of a wood booger. And I was pretty frightened, and I started going to the libraries and places like that, trying to find pictures of these Bigfoot. And just happened to be a page in there that showed, I believe it said 10 different type of Bigfoot creatures, and I don't know how many there are different ones, but that's what it said. I think there's probably even more than that different, but now I do since I've learned so much over the years. But the number 2 in the picture, it said number 2 wood booger. That was the second picture in that particular book that I looked at. And it looked just like what I'd seen, except the eyes were red in this picture, and the one I seen just had dark eyes with yellow or white around the pupil. So that's what got me into it. I became terrified, and trying to figure out what I'd seen.
Yeah, and I've heard that term wood booger when I was growing up in East Tennessee, and another one I used to hear my granny called it. She was from Cades Cove area, the Smokies. She called it a run at you. She said,
Yeah,
"Now there's run at yous out there," and I said,
yeah,
"What's that?" And she said, "Well, you'll find out." So it'll run at you. So
yeah.
uh, I never had any real what I consider Bigfoot experiences in East Tennessee, but I knew people that did. Years before it was a thing to talk about, I heard some stories when I was doing my first book, Strange Things in the Woods, about what sounded like Bigfoot type creatures from in the mid to late 60s in East Tennessee. But, that wasn't really known or talked about at that time. And around that time's when you had the Patterson Gimlin
Oh
sighting.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That definitely was what put the 1967 picture is definitely what put Bigfoot on the map
Yeah.
by far. But
And
my granddad had seen these creatures. He never told me about a Bigfoot, and I thought they might exist. Or really never thought about it a lot. But if they did, it was probably out on the Pacific North Coast. Washington or Oregon or British Columbia or somewhere around that area. California, I didn't know they were in Tennessee, but they are, and they still are. And I've had many encounters and experiences since then. But my granddad said he was 92 years old at that time, lived out in the middle of nowhere by himself. My grandmother and he were still married. They were married for 79 years, but she lived in town. She wanted modern conveniences, and he didn't. So um, after, he told me I've seen four, and my granddad always called me boy. He never called me by my name. He called me boy. And he said, I've seen four in my lifetime. And I've heard a lot more than that and know they were watching me, but I couldn't see them. And I said, well, why didn't you tell me about these things? He said, well, if I did, you'd have never hunted in the woods or camped in the barn or camped out with your friends and family, cousins here. So I didn't want to mess up your adventure. And he was probably right about that. If I'd have known those things existed, I wouldn't have been camping out or in the woods.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. We lived out in the country, had a 26 and a half acre farm, and I spent most of my time in the woods. And I never did see anything like that I considered a Bigfoot, but I had some strange experiences and things out there. I've been scared 3 times in my entire life, and two of them happened there, or well, one of them, the real scary one. Second most time I've been scared. But like I said, that one story that I collected, I heard a similar story from two different people right around the same area. So I think that was probably the same one. And then my dad's from over on the Cumberland Plateau, the Fentress County.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I heard a story from a guy that lived over there close to where my dad grew up. Guy that lived in the other next farm over several miles away had gashed his leg open with an axe, and they'd called an ambulance to come and pick him up. The ambulance was run the code, so they had the sirens going. And this guy, he lived, I think, to the east of where this other farm was. Well, he said to the west, when that siren went by, he heard some kind of creature calling back that was making a similar whooping sound to what that ambulance was. And he said it made all the hair raise up on the back of his neck. But that
Oh,
place
yeah.
over there, there's their farm, the family farm where my dad grew up. It's over 900 something acres and backed up
Wow.
to the Big South Fork on the Tennessee side. And you talk about a place that, as people say, looks squatchy. It's over there. There's a lot of Native American stuff over there, a lot of bluffs and places where they lived and worked and thing. And could go over there when they plowed the fields. After they plowed in the first rain, you could walk those fields and find arrowheads and stuff on top of the ground. So there's been people that's lived in there for millennia, but there's you get that feeling that there's something watching you in there. You get far enough out in the woods, and I've had that in the Smokies too. Again, never saw anything in the Smokies. Um, Strangest non-encounter that I ever had was in just outside Damascus, Virginia. I was doing a little bit on the Appalachian Trail, and I'd gone off trails in the middle of the night. I had a headlamp on, and something started pelting me with just small, round river rocks, and I wasn't anywhere near a river. And they're just coming out of the woods like in a straight line. They weren't like somebody was lobbing them; they're just flying. I didn't even feel them hitting me, but I heard them hitting the ground. and I picked one up, and it was warm to the touch. And I'd been hearing, some tree knocks and some
Right.
whoops and stuff. And but when it started throwing rocks at me, I thought, I better turn around and go another way. And I did. And I've since thought about that, and I don't think they were after me. I think they were warning me against something. I think if I'd continued on the path I was on, there was probably a bear or a big cat or something back there that I didn't want to run into in the dark.
Well,
And
what I've learned from these creatures, it took me a long time to get over my first encounter because I was quite fearful to even go in the woods anymore. I didn't hunt for about 7 years, and it was very strange. I had nightmares and everything for quite a long time. And the first 2 or 3 weeks after that, I had friends that were still hunting there with me. We had my camp right next to the barn, and they hunted, and I stayed in the house with my granddad. I didn't hunt the rest of the time. That was the opening day that I had that happen of black powder season. And, I found out over since then, if I hadn't run into the second clan I run into on the Common River, I probably would have never gotten over it. But those were so different than the first one I'd seen. And they really become my friends. I visit them nearly every day. And that was by complete accident. I was fishing when one of them kept stealing my minnow bucket. But there's a lot of different type of these creatures. I've learned that. There's the real friendly type that make the X's in the woods, large X's. And then there's other ones that are those what I call the real forest people. The other ones are Sasquatch or Bigfoot, which are very similar. Some of them look into those, but a lot of those aren't very friendly. They're aggressive. They'll bluff charge you. They just don't like humans and don't want to be around them.
yeah, and I've heard other people talk about that, how they're just like any kind of animal, if that's indeed what they are. That there's different ones. Like, you go to one area, the squirrels are this way. You go somewhere else, the squirrels are maybe darker. You've got the red squirrels and dogs. Look how many different dog breeds there are, yet they're all dogs. So I agree. And heard some stories about Mount Shasta. I've been up there a couple of times. That's a weird place. But I interviewed a girl who lived in Texas and just felt a pull to Shasta. She quit her job and bought a bunch of outdoor equipment and went and lived on the slopes in Shasta for, I think, 5 months. And she called them tree people. And they were friendly and benevolent and stuff to her. But so that's not always the case. And again, I think it's just like people. There's good and bad. And I think it's that way with Sasquatch or Sabe or Bigfoot or whatever you want to call it. And I met Bob Gimlin I was in Squatch Fest in Longview, Washington. Went up there a couple of times when I lived in Oregon. But he seems sincere. I think he's in his 90s or something now. But just to hear him recount it and he seems very genuine.
Oh, sure. I don't know how anybody couldn't believe in the Patterson Gimlin film. I mean, it's been debunked by everybody in the industry that's tried to break it down that it wasn't what it was. And I think M.K. Davis probably done, him and Thinker Thunker, I thought probably done the best observation on the breaking down of the body parts and the muscles of anybody I've seen. So,
yeah,
it's definitely credible. I don't know how anybody could make a suit.
Yeah, people try to claim that it's a costume and stuff, but if you look at costumes in TV and film at that time, they didn't have the know-how to make anything that convincing. I mean, you watch Gilligan's Island, the guy in the gorilla costume or the Beverly Hillbillies, you can tell it's a costume, but and the thing that got me was the part that gives away it's a female, has those pendulous breasts and they kind of sway or swing. Nobody would have been thinking about that if they're making a costume.
Well, it's kind of hard to find a 7.5 foot, they're estimating female running around, or even a male. I mean, there's not many 7.5 foot people. So that alone ought to get people's attention. Plus, the gait and the walk is so different than a human, especially the arm swing. But it's pretty credible. I'm one that 100% believes in it. And
I believe in it just through my own studying into it, and like you said, the gait and just the different parts of it. I think they encountered whatever that was, and it really was something non-human or at least partially human. But
I truly believe these things are an ancient people. I don't think they're an ape at all. I took a long time with the ones on the river. I was with them for uh, about nearly 3 years, or a little longer than 3 years. But I learned a lot from them, and they do have their own language. They do know human language, and I have some American Native blood in me. My grandmother was Lakota Sioux, so uh, I know the Lakota language, most of it, and I can speak it. And I introduced them as the Chayutaka, which means big elder, leader of the forest, and they knew exactly what I was talking about. So
Wow.
it was pretty amazing. I tried my best to get them to talk to me. Just nearly every time I'd go in, I'd tell them my name. Please tell me your name. And I don't think I've ever told this on anybody's show before, but my closest friends know about it. I've told them years ago, but I did this for maybe 2.5 years every time I'd go in. And when I was leaving, I would say bye. And I actually gave these ancient people, which I call the forest people, some whistles, some plastic whistles. I gave them everything. I'd give them different gifts, but I gave them some of these plastic whistles. And every time I'd go in, they would start blowing the whistles. They knew it was me. They knew my voice. They'd blow these whistles and get excited, and you could hear them running and jumping and everything else until I got in and got set down. Then I'd stop blowing them. But, I asked them for a long time, please tell me your name. And I didn't really realize. I never heard them speak a sentence, but the female that was the one I was most friendly with, she wasn't a grown one. She was a juvenile, mid-juvenile, over 5 foot, but they're very intelligent. And I went in and I said, my name is Daryl. Please tell me your name. And I would practically about gave up. I thought, well, maybe they can't talk or they don't know what I'm saying. And I was looking away and she went, Aleatha, real loud, a deep voice, Aleatha. And I thought, what? Did you say that? And I just looked at her. I kept looking. I said, Aleatha is your name. And she shook her head. And I got 2 words out of that clan in over 3 years, and that was one of them. And they do know who Jesus Christ are. Now, these are the forest people, the ones that make the X's in the woods. I never heard sentences or anything like that, but I did get a name out of her, and it was very important at that time. I was excited. I couldn't believe that they could even speak a word. But, since then I've heard, quite a few people. Dr. Matthew Johnson, a lot of people think Dr. J is crazy. I don't at all. After what I experienced on the river for about 3 years, he experienced a lot of the things I did. And I didn't even know about him, but I found out about him probably 10 years after all that happened. And he's had a lot of similar experiences, and he's had a lot more direct conversation with them than I have. I've never heard him speak sentences or anything like that. But a word I did get out of that female, and I'll never forget that moment. It was very extraordinary when she said Aleatha, and I've never forgot that name.
That's amazing. That is some story there, Daryl. Some experience that you had, and that's the thing. When people that are skeptics or non-believers try to debunk stuff, I know in my experiences, I know what I've seen, I know what I felt, I know what I heard, and nobody's ever going to convince me otherwise. I mean, it'd be like turning on your stove eye and then putting your hand on it, and then somebody telling you, "Oh, that ain't hot. It didn't burn you." I know what happened.
Steve, I gave up back. When I had my first encounter, you couldn't tell anybody. I mean, you told your friends. I even asked my friends were hunting. I said, "You ever seen anything down these woods? As long as we've been coming here, we've been coming there 4 or 5 years. We'd stay a whole week of opening black powder, which we call muzzleloader." And they said, "No, what are you talking about?" And all my friends always call me Big D because I'm 6'5" and 280, and I've been called that a long time. And I said, "What do you mean, Big D?" And Scott asked me, and I said, "Like a Bigfoot." And they all started laughing. They said, "You had too much to drink last night." I said, "No, I didn't have anything to drink." And I just kind of let it go at that. But you couldn't discuss it then. 30 years ago, it's been over 30 years now. There was no format. There were no podcasts, no radio shows, no shows like you have here. There was no Facebook. I mean, you couldn't discuss that type of thing. People thought you were absolutely crazy. And thank goodness my best friend of 42 years, Martin Groves, about a year later, he had an encounter in the LBL in between the lakes of a dogman trying to attack and kill him. And, he was a really close friend. And, he and I would discuss some of this and talk back and forth because he couldn't tell anybody either. At that time, he was sheriff's department employee, been there a long time, retired after 32 years now. And, I was an elected official in the same county, and it was difficult. You couldn't tell anybody. If you mentioned it to them, they thought, this guy's crazy. But thank goodness for this day and time, when you have a format like you have, it's really changed. And I think there's a big reason too. You hear so many encounters and so many experiences from people now. So thank you for having this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And that's the thing. There's people in all cultures, in all countries, in all walks of life that have seen and had these experiences. And that could be said just about anything in the paranormal. But Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Sabe, whatever you want to call it, it's not only nationwide, it's worldwide. And there seems to be different types of them. Like I was talking about the different breeds of dogs and stuff. Florida, you've got the skunk ape. Up here in New England, the Bigfoot creatures look different. And the Bennington Triangle in that area, they're similar, but they're different than the ones in the Pacific Northwest, which are different than the ones that are even in Northern California, Mount Shasta. They seem to be different than the ones in Washington and Oregon.
So when you get up into Alaska, that area, there's 10, 12, even taller ones seen up there. It seems like it's a whole different type breed of this creature. I'm not sure that it is. My good friend Ron Moorhead's been there several times, and I think it's probably a different type, forest person myself, or a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, one of the three. Of course, they're called by indigenous names everywhere different. My people call them the hairy man. There's so many names for the creature that everybody calls it a different name depending on the native heritage they are or the area they're living in. But I got to the point where I really didn't care what anybody thought. I mean, I'm still there. If you don't believe me, I don't care. I never try to convince anybody. I don't care whether they believe me or not. I know what I've seen. I know what I lived. And if they don't believe that, that's quite fine with me. Go right ahead and believe that way.
Yeah. I'm
point.
in 100% agreement with you there, brother. And that's another thing. All these indigenous people, Native American tribes, they all have a similar legend, and across all the different tribes. The ones in the Southwest, the ones in the Northwest, the ones up here, the Algonquins and the Seminole in Florida, they've all got that legend in there. And these were people that didn't communicate, certainly not like we do, but you lived back then on the other side of the country, that you never saw those other tribes and things, most likely. But to have those same stories, that's a truism. I think that puts some truth and some weight into it, and not just here, Canada, everywhere.
I think one thing that I see all the time, even in my group, and everybody seems to think that these things are all friendly. They're not all friendly. I mean, you better get the right kind. You don't know what you're going into the field and experiencing, because the only way I know how to tell the forest people from the Bigfoot or the Sass, which I call them, is the X markers. These creatures are very territorial, and you don't come in their territory without their permission. And they're pretty sincere about that against the other, what I call different types of them, which would be a Sass or a Bigfoot. So those X markers are all over the woods. If you find the forest people, they'll be on the floor of the trail. They'll be at huge trees making X's. And I learned a lot from those on the river, because I got very fortunate that they were the real forest people. They were never aggressive toward me. They were very friendly. I didn't see the whole clan, never did. I only seen 3 of them, but I could hear them in there. They were in a huge patch of what I call kudzu. It looks like vines, and it was just went down the riverbank for miles. It was real thick, and it was hard to see in there. But the three that I got to see regularly that liked me, those were friendly. You know, they're cautious because they're afraid of humans because humans have hurt their families over the years, and they're scared of them. It takes a long time to be able to trust with them, and it took me a long time. And I was there nearly every day. Sometimes I'd stay the night with them, and you know I wasn't sleeping with them, but I was not too far from where they were at, and they came to know me. And they, first of all, these things, how they do it, I don't know. They can read your heart, your intentions, and why you're there. Now, I don't know how they do this, but and I know that to be true because there's been several times when I started to do something or say something or give them something, they already knew what I was thinking. I know that probably sounds crazy to people, but these things are so intelligent. They have some special abilities
Yeah,
that
I've
we
heard that they can speak to you without using their mouth, that and they can hear and understand. They've got some kind of sixth sense or something that either we don't have anymore that we've got and don't know how to use. I think they're more evolved than we are in some regards.
I think you're right. You know, Ron Moorhead, you know, if you've ever read a book called, Ron Moorhead's got the best book that I think breaks down and explains. It's called The Quantum, and it breaks down how they transfer this energy. And they can go interdimensional. When I say interdimensional, you can't see them. You can see an outline sometimes of them. I haven't seen one just do that right in front of me, but I'm sure that I've walked in some areas where they were. But they also have abilities to mind speak, I think is what you were getting at. And
Yeah.
I have personally never mind spoke with them. They did try to mind speak with me. I was, quite frankly, scared to open my mind up like that because I was afraid they might harm me. Because if
Yeah.
they can control your mind, you know, and talk to you like that, then there may be something that come about that you may not want to be involved in. But I've got good friends. Scott Pace is probably the best in the world at mind speaking, and you know they do it regularly with them. I personally haven't, but I've seen their abilities. Their abilities are amazing. What they can do.
Yeah. It's like these people that remote view and stuff, and just the accuracy that some of them have. It is amazing. And I've heard people talk about before that whatever these creatures are, hominids or humanoids or inhumanoids, as Barton would call them, they to have the ability to vibrate. I don't know if it's at a higher or a lower frequency than we do, but they seem to be able to do it at will. Comedian Mitch Hedberg once quipped that every picture of Bigfoot is blurry because Bigfoot is blurry. It's an actual picture. The creature is blurry. And,
Right.
there's probably a little bit of truth in that.
Well, I think it's a higher energy. They transform it into a higher energy. If you read, if anybody's ever read Quantum by Ron Moorhead, they'll understand a lot more about it. I think he's got it figured better than anybody. But you know,
I haven't read that, but I certainly will. I just added it to my Amazon cart. So there you go. Thanks for the
yeah,
tip
it's a
there.
great book. You know, you've also got, you know, other people that have different ideas and have done different things with these creatures too, which have actually seen them cloak and go interdimensional. I personally haven't, but I did see one go behind a tree one time, and I walked right to the tree and never did find him. So I don't know where he went, but he went somewhere. And they're, you know, getting back to Barton Unley, you know, Barton has never had a good experience with a forest person or a Bigfoot. And quite frankly, I understand why, because, you know, Barton is one of my closest friends, and he and Martin Groves and Ron Moorhead are my team. And Billy Howell down in Tennessee, me and him do a little research. We used to do a lot together. But when you got those guys like Ron, who's experienced some craziness, and you know, Barton Unley grew up in Kentucky, and these things were trying to break in his house and kill him and his family every night. He was terrified of them. He never had a good experience with any of them. And I've told him for years, I said, Barton, I mean, you just haven't been around the right ones. They're not all like that. They're like people. There's bad and good and all, animals too.
Yeah.
And, you know, he never had that. And just recently, he feels different about that. He and I were in the Land Between the Lakes back in October. I, and Martin Groves and Ron Moorhead, we had a cabin back in there and stayed 3 nights. And we had a family of Bigfoot right next to the cabin, and they were just making all kinds of havoc. He was actually filming me on a personal podcast he had for one of my experiences. And these things were breaking limbs right behind us. You could hear them. You could see silhouettes of them going back behind the woods. And he said, I can't believe it. I can't believe these things aren't, they're here. They're not attacking me, because like I said, it was an experience for him because he realized they're not all out to kill you.
Yeah, I believe that's true. And a lot of times I think they know your intent. If you're coming in there to try to disrupt or hunt them or something like that, they know that, and you
100%.
won't have any experience or you'll have a bad experience. Now, what do you make of some of these historical experiences like the Ape Canyon attacks where those miners were supposedly attacked? What do you think that just they were in a place that they shouldn't have been and they upset these people, or the
Well, like I
Sasquatch?
said, that I don't know what type of creature that was, but I'm familiar with the Ape Canyon attack. And if I remember correctly, one of those miners shot one of them off a bluff.
Yeah,
If I'm
that
thinking
was the
right.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if you go in there with the wrong intent and just shoot one of these creatures for no reason at all, it's really no different than somebody shooting your brother or one of your family members. I mean, they're going to retaliate. So, first of all, you're in their area. They're very territorial. I mean, very territorial. They don't want you to come in their area without permission. And if you do, then they're going to retaliate and try to run you out by different means, like you said, throwing small gravels or bluff charging or yelling or screaming at you or whatever they feel like doing. But when you go in with an intention and shoot one of them, you've kind of opened up your own war. And I think
Yeah.
that's what happened.
Absolutely. You declared war on them in their territory. So of course
That's
they're going to
correct.
retaliate. And
Yeah.
that was they called them ape men. They didn't know what else to call them, as that was back in the 1920s when there was
Right.
Not all this modern concept of Bigfoot and stuff. Now the Native American stories are older than that, but I believe something happened to them up there. And I talked to somebody that was part of a paranormal investigation team in California that had gone up there, and they think they found the site of that original cabin. They found some handmade nails and one of the roof beams or something, I think. But
Right.
in that area, if that entire story is true, there should be a skeleton of that one the guy claimed he shot off the bluff, unless I think, and that's another thing that you hear a lot of skeptics say, well, how come we've never found a carcass or we've never found a skeleton? Who's to say they don't bury their dead like we do?
Well, I don't know what they do with their dead, and I've been asked that many times, and other people have speculated. But these things are, I know people may think I'm crazy, but these things are not an ape. I'll say that again. They're not an ape. These
Yeah.
are an ancient people. And I asked the ones on the river many times, where are you from? They never answered, but they pointed up in the sky. And I said, are you from another galaxy or another planet? I asked them that several times, and they did shake their head in acknowledgement. I asked them if you know Jesus Christ. They shook their head in acknowledgement. These things are a lot more intelligent than you think they are, and they don't want to let people know that they're capable of doing things like that. They want to play kind of dumb because they don't trust you. So now some of the type out there, like I said, are not like those. I do think some of them will kill you. I do think if you go to Dr. Matthew Johnson again, he calls them the Trachon, the bad ones. And I don't doubt that that's not the name for them. I haven't conversated with these forest people like he has, and I wish I could, but I haven't. But they are killers, and I do think they will kill you and eat you and scatter your bones through the woods. So a lone hiker is not a very smart guy out in the middle of nowhere. And I've done it before myself, but I don't do it any longer. But you don't need to go in the woods by yourself.
Yeah, that's me. I've hiked all over the Smokies and did about 3 months on the Appalachian Trail one time. I went from Georgia up into Virginia. Just took my time doing it, got off the trail a lot, but you couldn't pay me to get out there and hike alone now, not after the type of videos that I do, these people that go missing and that disappear.
Oh, yeah.
And there's something out there in the woods. Now, a lot of it, is not as mysterious as people think. It can be explained. People overconfident, ill prepared, uh, didn't take enough supplies with them, or they thought it'll
Sure.
never happen to me. But then there are some that just don't have any rational or reasonable explanation. I think occasionally that there's something out there that takes people. Now, it may be a human predator, it may be a big cat, it may be a bear, but with animal attacks and things like that, there will be forensic evidence. And some of these
Sure.
people, when they disappear, there's never a shred of evidence. There's maybe some boot prints, you can see where they were, and then they're just not. And
Well, since you got into the missing, I've been keeping up with yours, and they're pretty awesome stories. But I do believe that I don't. Do I think it's all Bigfoot taking these people? No, not by any means. I'm not even sure Bigfoot are taking them. That's my own guess, but I'm sure there's probably other cryptids or creatures that are taking them. I don't know. I've seen two Dogmen, and I didn't believe in those forever, but I seen the first one in Tazewell County, Virginia, and the last one in October of this 2022 with Martin Groves in Land Between the Lakes. And they do exist, and that's the only ones I've ever seen. I've never seen an alien or anything like that, but I know those things exist, and I wouldn't be surprised if some type of creature is not taking these people. Now, I have seen what they call the clear man. I don't know what you actually call it. It looks like a piece of saran wrap in the woods, and it shrinks. I've seen one of those in the Shenandoah National Forest. It scared me to death. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I don't know what it is, but it was something clear that was walking between a tree and between another tree, and I watched it go down a wood line and disappear. So I don't know what
yeah,
that is.
some people
So,
call it the glimmer man or the predator type
right,
creature.
correct.
I had an experience with one of those, but it was in the city. It was when I lived in Portland, Oregon. I was downtown late at night. I'd been to an event at Powell's bookstore, Powell's City of Books, and I think it was about 11 o'clock, and I was waiting on the commuter train to get back to my part of Portland. And there at the train station, I saw something shimmering over on the corner. It looked like it was between like a lamppost and a permanent garbage can there. And I thought it was steam coming up out of vents in the street there, but it was in the warm weather. And I thought, well, that's weird. So I walked over there. And about the time I got up close to where it was, I noticed not only is there not any vents there, but whatever it was, and it was short statured anyway, it would have been less than 4 feet tall, but it was a human type shape. And it just kind of squatted down behind that garbage can.
Oh
And
gosh, yeah.
my what I call my granny senses, she was empathic and things, and every nerve in my body tingled. And I thought, I need to get out of here. And I ended up crossing the street against traffic and ran through the traffic to get away from whatever it was, hoping that it wouldn't chase me. Went several
Wow.
blocks on up to the next train station. It didn't follow me as far as I know, but it was just like you said. It was an outline of a human, but you could see through it. It looked like plastic or saran wrap, or kind of like the heat waves that you see coming off the
Right.
road in the summertime. It was kind of shimmering, and it just squatted down. And I thought, nope. So I never
I think
didn't go in
that's
downtown Portland anymore after dark. I'd take
people
an
don't
Uber.
realize these creatures, everybody has a thought theory that these creatures are way out in the forest. And there's a lot of them that are out in the forest, but they're in town too. I mean, if there's a funnel way from a wood line that goes into the forest down to an area of town, they're there. I've got plenty of documented calls from people in Tennessee. Hartsville, Tennessee is a perfect example of a lady there that called me numerous times back in 2010 or 11 and said, I was told to call you. I've got one of these Bigfoots over here at my house and it's scaring me to death at night. So, long story short, I went to her house twice at night, didn't see a thing. I was there 2 nights all night long, did not see nothing. And then she called me again. She goes, they're back. And I said, well, they probably seen me and they come back because I'm not there. But she actually had footage of these things coming out of the woods, and they were coming out behind a restaurant in downtown. Of course, Hartsville, Tennessee is not a big downtown, but it's still in the middle of town, around houses, around subdivisions, and they were getting into the dumpster of this restaurant and taking bags of food scraps out of it and walking off into the woods. So And there's been numerous encounters of this happening. I've had numerous people call me about it, and also numerous encounters of Dogman just walking around in the middle of downtown Maryville, Tennessee. So
How
I
about
don't.
that?
It sounds crazy, I know,
But
but
I don't doubt it. The
these are
one
reliable people.
the one eyewitness sighting that I had, what I believe was a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, it wasn't out in the woods at all. I was living in a little town called St. Helens, Oregon. It's just outside Portland, and kind of like Mayberry. It's a small town. Have you ever
Right.
seen the Disney movies about Halloween Town? That's where that was shot. It was in St. Helens,
Okay.
and I was out. I smoked at the time. I quit smoking a little over a year ago. I was smoking at the time, and up until recently, I've been a lifelong insomniac. It's about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd walked out in the driveway to have a cigarette, and I could see up to the street that went by. I lived on a little dead end street, and whatever this thing was, it came walking down the sidewalk, or it might have been the edge of the road. I don't think there was a sidewalk on that side of the road, but it was. I could tell it was a big person, and it looked like maybe they were wearing a fur coat, and it had that weird gait. They were swinging their arms and taking these
Right.
huge steps, and it passed in front of a stop sign and kept going on down the street out of sight. And I thought, what in the world was that? I said, I'm going to go get a look at that. And I heard my grandmother's voice, not audibly, but just in the back of my mind saying,
Right.
what you need to do is get your butt back in the house and leave that alone. And so
Right.
I went in and stayed
Right.
in. But I walked up there the next day where I saw it pass by that stop sign. And that stop sign on the post was a lot higher than I thought it was. The thing's head was up near the top of the stop sign. It would have had to been, between 7 and 8 feet tall.
Right.
And it looked like it was wearing a fur coat. It didn't have much of a neck that I could see. Its head was kind of almost gumdrop shaped or something. It was just sat right down on its shoulders, swinging its arms, taking these big steps, and it was shiny. It wasn't raining, but it looked like somebody wearing a wet fur coat, and I could see the street lights letting off of it. But it had a destination in mind. It wasn't looking around. It was just, moving on. But that's an area, that's not St. Helens, Oregon is not that far from
No.
uh,
Yeah.
all the other. Mount St. Helens is in Washington, but St. Helens, Oregon is called that because on a clear day you can see Mount St. Helens from there. But uh, that's the only eyewitness thing. And I've seen some footprints and things. I was up in Washington State when I lived in Vancouver, Washington. I'd gone up in April or May, it was spring, but had gone up there, still snow line. If you in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, which they've had a lot of sightings up there.
Right.
And I was with a friend, and we drove up above the snow line. I just wanted to see some snow, and I walked up in the snow, and there, right in the edge of the snow line, there was one footprint, barefoot, huge, like something had been walking along that snow line and just traversing at an angle, and it just put 1 foot over in the snow. But it was a huge, and ain't nobody going to be up there walking around barefoot. It was
No.
cold up there. So I've seen the footprints, and then they had that one sighting, but I've heard them and I've sensed them more. Like I said, there's places, even in the Smokies, that I've been in where you feel like you're intruding and better behave yourself, or better yet, go somewhere else. And I know we did a video about feral people that my wife
Oh, yeah.
Nicole wrote. And
Right.
I think a lot of this, what people claim as feral people, it's not feral humans as we know them at all, but these tree people, as you call them. And
Right.
I've had people come at me about that and say, well, you don't think that people could really hide in the forest and not be seen. Oh, if you don't believe that, then you've never been far enough back in the deep woods. I've been some places in the Smokies that, I'm not talking about the trails and the stuff for the tourists. I'm talking about deep woods, backcountry stuff. There could be a whole family living back there, and there probably are. Now, there are people that go off grid. Dwight McCarter, who was a ranger in the Smokies, he's retired now. He talked about there were people that lived in the Smokies. He didn't come right out and say that they were Sasquatch or Bigfoot or tree people. He said there's some people that like their privacy. And people try to poo-poo that and debunk it. But then you have Eric Rudolph, the bomber that was
Oh, yeah.
top of the FBI's most wanted list. This was a man with no outdoor experience, no survival training or anything. He hid out in Nantahala National Forest for several years,
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
the only way he got caught, he was coming into a little town there, like you were talking about with those Sasquatch. He was raiding the dumpster outside a little convenience store, getting the expired little Debbie's and Twinkies and stuff out of the garbage that they'd thrown away, and that's how he got
right.
caught. So yeah, you absolutely can. Anything can hide out there, human and otherwise. And then the thing about the carcass that I was talking about, that I've been all in the woods most of my life. I've never seen a bear carcass. The only deer carcass I've ever seen was where somebody was poaching or hunting out of season and had left it out there. You don't see any kind of carcass out there.
Not a
Uh,
lot because you got so many scavengers, first of all, that take care of it. But
yeah, the smaller creatures would make
right,
short work of that. So I
right.
don't think that's evidence that it doesn't exist because they've never found a skeleton or a dead one.
Well, I think the Smokies hide a lot of things. It's a mysterious place there. It really is. You get in some of those mountains, and there probably had never been a person walk through there. So
Yeah, I agree,
you know,
except maybe
it.
indigenous people or something.
Oh yeah,
I've said that in all seriousness that I've been places where I'm probably the only Caucasian person, and I'm an eighth Cherokee that's ever set a foot back in there.
yeah. I believe that. I mean, I'd say there's even probably some American natives that's never even crossed some of these areas, and you get up into some of these deep forests like you're talking about, the Smokies, which go, all over the backside of Tennessee and North Carolina. And there's some woods in there that are just nothing but just go for miles and they're dense and thick. And I don't know how you would ever cover it all. It
Yeah,
would be difficult
and
for a
they
whole
had
group of
a
people.
lot of the indigenous peoples. They had areas that they avoided that they wouldn't go into and things. They
Oh, yeah.
knew there was stuff in there that you don't want to mess with. And a lot of these places that have hell or devil in the name seem to be that. Now, again, I don't know if they were so named because of the stuff that happens there, or if just simply the act of naming it that attracted stuff there, like the concept of a tulpa or something like that. I thought.
Funny you said that, Steve. You're exactly right. Some things that are named with devil or something on it seem to have some type of mysterious thing going on there. The area that Martin Groves had his first encounter was called Devil's Backbone. And the area that we seen the Bigfoot was on the outside of Devil's Backbone. We were still, not a Bigfoot, I'm sorry, a Dogman last October of 22. That was the out backside of the Devil's Backbone. And I've heard of other people seeing different type things, or even as far as that goes, even seeing some type of entities or ghost type creatures in those areas. So they were definitely named that for a reason. I don't know what the reason was. That was before my time, but I'm sure it had something to do with something evil being there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Now, you mentioned that you'd had a dogman sighting. Could you tell us about that? I'm fascinated by that, and I'd love to hear it.
Well, my first dogman sighting was in October of 21, and I'd been sick that fall. I'd had eye surgery, and um, I had time to do a few things, and I actually sit in an old country store here in the morning at times and drink coffee with just the farmers. We sit there. It's a little gas station store, old country store, and I was sitting in there that morning, and this gentleman comes in with what I thought was his son, and the guy who owns this particular store is Indian descent, and he can't speak English real well, and he doesn't understand sometimes what they're saying. And this gentleman walked up to him, and he had been out getting gas in front, and he said, "Do you know anything about creatures living around here?" And I was sitting at this table, maybe 10 foot from him, and it just caught my ear, the creature part, him saying that. And I looked around, and the guy who owns the store there, he was looking at me, and I said, "Well, what kind of creature are you talking about?" And he said, "I don't know what it is, but it's killing all my aunt's goats." And I said, "Well, where do you live?" And he said, "Well, pretty good ways from here. We're just traveling through here today, visiting some family." And I said, okay. He gave me, me and him talked for a little bit. And he said, here's my address. If you want to come out there. He actually asked me if I wanted to follow him that day. And I had something I had to do and I couldn't do that. But I actually got his address and I drove out there. And it was a good drive from where I was living at. It was probably 3 hours, but it was in Tazewell. I think it's called Tazewell County. I don't know the areas that well in Virginia, but I think pretty sure I know it was Tazewell something, Virginia. And I had lost service. Couldn't a lot when I got close to where he told me, and I couldn't find where I was going, so I had to drive back out to the main highway to pick service up on my cell phone with the GPS. And he told me, meet me at this little store. It's an old store that's closed. Just meet me there, and you can follow me. And I did, and I followed him back in there. He had to cross a creek in front of his house. It wasn't his house. It was his great aunt's house. He was living with her, him and his. I think he had a daughter too, and his wife. They all lived there on the farm with her. And he told me, he said, meet me there, and I followed me in, and I did. And I stopped and got out, and he wanted me to look at the area where these things had killed his goats, and the goats were already removed. I was hoping they had been, so I could see what kind of damage they had to them, but he'd already hauled them off. And I think they had 7 goats, and whatever this creature was had killed 1 or 2 over a period of time till it finally got them all. And it was real muddy around the small barn shed type area, and he was showing me where they were laying, and I knew immediately. He said, "Here's the track of one of them." And when I seen the track, I knew immediately it wasn't a Bigfoot. It was a dogman because I'd seen dogman tracks before, and wasn't 100% positive that's what it was, but that's what it looked like. And he pointed up to a field and showed me where he thought they were coming in at. And they come in right at dark, right before it gets dark. They start coming in, and he had actually run these creatures off a couple times. He would hear the goats running, and he would go out the door and start yelling, and they would run off. They were scared of him, but they finally got all of them. So he showed me an area where I could park my truck, and it was probably about 100 yards from him. You could go through a little field area, and you go up on top of a hill, and there's a gate you open up to pull in there. And I sat on top of that hill, and I sat there for, well, I went back and forth for about 3 weeks, and I was starting to get to the point where, well, I'm not going to see anything, whatever this is, has left. And I was getting kind of discouraged, and then I decided to go back one more time, and I was sitting on this little rise, and it was overlooking this pasture field that was fenced in. And it was probably about 100 yards from where I was sitting to the wood line where the fence went across. It was a fence, square type wire fence with barbed wire on top. And I sat and watched for, like I said, nearly 3 weeks. And I decided I'll go back one more time. And I told him, I said, I went down and talked to him a couple times, said, I'm not seeing anything. And that last evening, which was going to be my last, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of this field, and it was coming across the fence. And I had binoculars, and I looked at them, and I seen something go on the ground, all fours. And this field had sage grass in it, but it wasn't completely sage. There was patches of open ground. And I seen this thing running, and it wasn't running like a dog. It was galloping like a horse. It was very strange, and I got a little alarmed. I had my gun with me next to my seat, him in my seat next to me. And I watched this thing run all the way down across that field. It would break out of the sage grass, and I could see bits and parts of it as it was running. And it ran right down to the almost straight ahead of where I was sitting in the truck. It was about halfway in the field, and when it stopped there, it stood up on its hot legs, and I couldn't see the feet. There was grass over them, but I could see the bend of the leg, like the hock area, as it stood there. And it looked right in my direction. It didn't look at me, but it looked in my direction, and it stepped over the fence by itself, and it went off into the woods, and I didn't see it. And I was pretty weirded out. I'd never seen a dog man, but And it wasn't a massive creature. It was probably about 6 foot tall, I'm guessing. Well, I know when I went down there, but next day I went back in the daylight and went down there. And I'd measured it from a certain mark on a tree next to that fence, and it was a little over 6 foot. I don't remember the exact 6'1" or 2" by a tape measure. And it looked just like a German Shepherd in the head, like a large a black German Shepherd head is what it looked like. It had the body of a human type, but it had legs and it had, body parts more like an animal. I didn't get to see it very long, but I remember the head and the legs so well, and the head was just huge, but it was like a black German Shepherd, looked identical. And I went back the next day and looked around and parked and walked over there. And I had my gun with me, and I walked over there. I crossed that fence where it had crossed over, and I walked down and around that area, and it went into a real thick area, a thicket of limbs and all types of bushes, and there was a little trail going through there, and it followed around to the left to a bluff, and something had dug out up under that bluff. You could see it like a hole dug up under that bluff, and like it had made a den up in there, and I walked to the edge of that, and I could still see the tracks. Something had went up under there. And there was a lot of deer bones laying around it, and they were old, they weren't fresh. A lot of different type bones laying around that little trail. And I got a little weird feeling because I was in there by myself, so I just got out of there because I couldn't really see around me very well. But I went on back, and the next day I was kind of excited. I kind of brought some camera gear with me and everything. I was going to try to film this thing, and I came back and I was crossing the creek going up to the hill there. You have to go through a creek right off the main road, and then you go up and turn right to go to this hill I was parking on. And there was a Virginia Game Wildlife Research officer in a truck coming down from the drive that I was going the same drive he was. I was going to the right, and he was coming from the house where the man lived. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I told him, I said, "Well, I have permission from the property owner to go up here and just look around, scout it." He said, "What are you scouting for?" And I said, "I just certain animals." And he said, "Well, there's not anything in season right now." I said, "Well, I'm not here to hunt them. I'm just kind of scouting." And he asked for my permission slip and told him I didn't have one. And he said, "You have to have a permission slip to be on somebody's property hunting." So he made me go with him up to the house. And of course, the gentleman that lived there told him, "Yeah, I gave him permission to be here. He's fine." And came back down and he talked to me and said, "Let me tell you something. The best thing for you to do is not to be up here." And I said, "Well, why is that?" He goes, "Well, there's some type of creature that's been killing people's livestock on the adjoining farms." And he goes, "I already know about this gentleman's goats being killed." And he said, "Best thing for you to do is get out of here and don't come up here because we don't know what it is, but it's killing livestock." And he said, "If you got a weapon," and I told him I did, and he was kind of filling me out. And actually, I left when he did because I didn't want to cause any trouble with him. And went back up there a couple more times after that, but I never seen anything. So I think they possibly may have killed that creature. I don't know. Never knew what happened to it, but that's the first one I ever seen. The second one I ever seen was a year later, a different day, but it was, I believe it was the 19th of October, 22. That was 29 years or 30 years, the day of the actual area that Martin Groves, one of my best friends, had been attacked at the Land Between the Lakes area in Tennessee and Kentucky. And he and I had been there for a couple of days, and we were just scouting the area. And we'd do it at night and day. We'd hike, and then we'd get in the truck. And if you've ever been to Land Between the Lakes, it goes back into the middle of nowhere. There's just little roads and trails that go forever. There's like 170,000 acres back in there, and it's real remote. And we had been raided. It was after 12 at night, we had stopped and got a snack, and off in the woods, we had our lunches packed, and we had stopped his truck and got out, and we were just riding the roads hoping to see some type of creature. And when I say roads, these aren't paved roads. These were like dirt roads or little gravel roads that cut off to the left and right. And there's nobody back in there. It's in the middle. There's just nothing back there. And we had just turned on that particular road, close to the Devil's Backbone, and we were maybe doing 1 mile an hour. And I had my window down. It was warm, and he had his window down in his truck, and we might have been doing 1 mile an hour. We were driving real slow, trying to keep our eye out in case we could see anything in that area. And over to the right of me in the ditch was this huge creature. Turned out it was a creek bed right next to a culvert where this thing was laying. And it was staring right at me. I was literally 5 to 7 foot from this thing's head, and the head was about half the size of his truck window. I never seen anything like that in my life, and it had kind of like a blue mist, kind of like a mist like behind it. I couldn't see its feet, but I could see it. It was crouched like a cat does when it's going to jump on a mouse or something. It was looking right at me. It had these long, deep eyes that were clear, crystal clear, like flashlights shining through them. It had mane like a lion, and it was looking like it was going to jump right on me. I looked at Martin and I said, "Do you see it?" And before I could get that out, he goes, "Yeah, I see it." And it was this. I thought he was going to jump right in the window and get me, but about that time we both got what I call zapped, and I didn't get it nearly as bad as Martin did, but my legs were tingly and my chest was kind of felt like I had compression on it. A little headache, but he got hit real bad. He was couldn't breathe. His tongue had swelled up. His throat had swelled together. He says, "I can't breathe, Bubba." He calls me Bubba. I call him Bubba. Just Tennessee slang. But I said, "Well, let me drive. You get over him." He couldn't hardly talk. And about that time, this thing come out of the ditch area it was in. It went behind the truck. He's looking in the rearview mirror where this thing went behind the truck, and it didn't run. It kind of like glided across this little dirt road we're on. It made a right, and it went through a small part of a field. And the weird thing about this thing is it was a creature. You could see the whole silhouette of the creature, but you could also see through it. It was transparent. And it went straight through that field, and it went into the woods and went up a bank, and it sounded like a bulldozer in there. It was breaking limbs and sticks and everything. And I'm scared to death for him because I'm thinking he can't breathe, and we're trying to get out of there, and we're back in the middle of nowhere. And finally we got going, and he's sick. The whole truck's I can't smell anything. I lost my smelling when I got COVID in 2020. I can only smell very few things, coffee and something spicy occasionally. But he said the truck stunk so bad that he couldn't hardly stand the smell. And we finally got on that road, on down the road to what's called the Trace, the main road that goes through there. And we got off into an area where there was a lot of lights in a parking area. And he got out, and I was real worried about him. I tried to get him to go to the hospital because I thought he was going to pass out because he couldn't breathe. And he had improved a little bit by then. He was at least able to breathe, but he couldn't hardly walk. His legs were real tingling, and his chest was real compressed feeling. And we sat there for a good while, and I insisted he go to the hospital, but he wouldn't do it. So he got better. He got a little better. We actually drove home that night instead of staying another night because I wanted him to go to the hospital or be close to the hospital. And he was sick for about a week over that. Now, mine went away pretty quick. I was okay the next day. I was a little delirious, but I was okay. But he actually wrote that entire second chapter is in his latest book, which is Beast Between the Rivers. Is about me and his sighting in that of October of 22. And It was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. I've never seen a creature like that, and how it was just transparent. It was almost cartoonish looking, but it was real. And it could have attacked us. It could have easily jumped right in the window and took us out because it was right next to us, but it didn't. So I don't know if it was coming out of a portal or what it was doing, but it was a kind of like a blue mist behind it when I first seen it. And strangest thing I've ever seen. I can't even understand how it was even possible.
Wow, that's some encounter. I can't even imagine. And the reaction, it almost sounds like a hystemic reaction that your friend had there. Do you think that was something that thing caused him to have, or was that just his natural reaction? Did it awaken something that's
No,
dormant in the human body?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Steve.
No, go ahead.
I think that I don't know how these creatures do that. I've personally been zapped, as we call it, because that's what I've heard it called, by Bigfoot myself twice, 2 times over the last 32 years. I've been zapped by Dogman once, and it was that occasion. But I was nowhere near zapped as much as he was. Now, Barton Nunley and Martin Groves and I have sat down and discussed this many times. What this does to your body and how it makes you feel, I just can't believe it's an infrasound. I believe it's almost like a radiation because it makes you just sick. And, Martin is not in what I would say the best of health anyway. But, he had a real difficult time overcoming that. And I was checking on him every day. I go home every month and nearly every month. Sometimes in the winter we don't, but we all get together, us three, and lately Ron Moorhead's been with us, but we'll go out and stay in the wilderness of that area for 2 to 4 days at least once a month, sometimes twice, and I think it's a form of radiation for what it does to you. I can't think of anything. Whales do infrasound, but they're not like this feeling. It's just like it's something. I can't even explain it. I don't know how to explain it.
That's a good analogy, though. It does sound like something stronger. And I know a lot of times when there's some type of paranormal activity, that'll happen. Read about a black-eyed kids encounter.
Oh,
where,
yeah.
the
I
lady
heard that
she had
story.
like their eyes, like she'd been exposed to radiation, and then her husband, then he came down with some kind of rare blood cancer not long after that. And then in UFO encounters, you hear that where people have like what's similar to radiation burns or the effects of high dose radiation.
Well, I can tell you this much. Scott Carpenter was a good friend of mine. We weren't like everyday close like Martin and Barton and us are, but, he was a good friend. He helped me rebuke some creatures that were trying to destroy my farm and my animals back in 2020. And, Scott was out numerous times, and he hiked a lot of different trails up in the Smokies and other areas there and had a lot of encounters, a tremendous lot of encounters, even with portals opening behind him and stories he had told me of where they came to his house too. And I will never believe that, I miss that guy. He was just a real credible, great guy that we lost. Nobody will replace Scott Carpenter and his work, but I'll never believe that he just passed from an aneurysm. I think these things can take a toll on your body. I don't want to be zapped by them, but I don't know how to stop from being unless you just stay away from them altogether. But
it makes you think you wear some sort of EMF protection or something. They make clothing now that's got.
Joe and Jesse are good friends of mine of Hellbent Holler, and they actually carry a Geiger counter with them now, and they have picked up radiation in tracks. So I'm a true believer that it has some type of similar abilities of radiation, whatever they put off when they want to. I don't know why they do it. I guess it's in fear of their own life.
So it could be their normal way to protect themselves, like a skunk, sprays you with its.
Correct.
These things can spray you with the high dose radiation. That's frightening.
But I think that I think that can take a toll on your body, and you know, I don't know what kind of effects it does have. Nobody's ever studied it, but it could have some type of ability with them doing this numerous times, so maybe even weaken the arteries or the vessels in your body. I don't know, but you know, I just think it was. I would not be surprised at all if that didn't have some contribution of Scott passing, because you know he died of an aneurysm, and he'd been zapped a lot of times, and I find it hard to believe that he just had it like that, you know. And he may have. I don't know. It's my own speculation, but I sure miss that guy, and he did a lot for this community. So it's
Yeah,
pretty
Scott
weird.
was legendary, and for you to be friends with him and stuff, you know, our condolences on your loss there. But he was something else, that's for sure.
Well, I don't think his legacy will ever get away from what all of us that are involved in it. You know, I don't think it ever will. I mean, you can look back. There's some pretty crazy things that he did, and you know, and he was one of the first ones that said these things are coming into the city, because he was walking in the downtown park of Knoxville, Tennessee, and had a couple of shots of these things in the woods of the parked area that, you know, people walk and play on the playground and everything every day. So, you know, I think people are the thing about it is it's real hard for the human mind to wrap their mind around this anyway, because we're raised to believe there's no monsters in the woods. It's just a myth. And then when you see one, it changes your whole world. It's definitely life changing.
Yeah,
But
it definitely shifts your personal paradigm. That's for
no
sure.
doubt. Yeah. And you got your average people walking around that don't believe in this or don't follow it. How many times have they passed one and didn't even know what they
They didn't
passed?
even know it. And I've often said that a skeptic is just somebody that hasn't had or a non-believer is just somebody that hadn't had the right experience yet. Because
Sure.
it
I
can
agree with
happen
that.
anywhere, anytime, and you're right. I think there's people that stuff happen all around them, and because they're not open to it or they're not aware of it or hyper aware like we are, they miss the boat on that. They've experienced all kinds of things and didn't even know it.
Either that or they put it off in their mind. They don't want to believe it. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and
that's
there's
true as well.
so many people too afraid to talk about it because of the criticism. So, how many people aren't on Facebook or listening to your show or any other show? You know, people, I know a lot of people in their 50s on up, they don't hardly ever even get on Facebook.
Yeah,
Most of them
yeah,
they don't even know what Facebook is. They
yeah.
don't
I
know where,
know a lot of people.
how
I,
many have
I
they seen that we've
yeah,
never heard?
and I found that when I was writing my first book, Strange Things in the Woods, when I was collecting those stories, and just about, I'd say 99% of those people have passed on now. But there were people, you know, that 60, 70, 80 years old,
Oh,
20,
yeah.
30, 40 years ago when I was started gathering these stories, and they were reticent to tell that, but for fear of being ridiculed or trying to figure out what you were up to. And had people tell me stuff that their wife had never heard the story. Maybe they'd been married 40 years, you know, and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
be sitting there with us and she'd say, "You never told me about that." And another thing, I like to do book readings sometimes. And one of my favorite places to go is a retirement home. And, you know, some people are
Oh,
like,
yeah.
they're looking for something to do and they'll come and sit and hang out, do their knitting or crocheting or whatever, and then leave when it's over. But there's usually one or two people that'll hang around. And I know what they're doing. The crowd kind of leaves and they'll sidle up to me and say, that reminded me, I want to tell you about something that happened when I was a boy. And I
Oh,
love
yeah.
those kind of stories because, you know, otherwise those
Sure.
stories die with those people if they haven't told it to anybody. And then I've heard that. I've never told this to anybody, but, you know, I feel like I can tell you. And I love that their legacy lives on through my stories and through my writings and stuff. And that's great because
It's
otherwise,
amazing, it really is. A lot of great knowledge that will never replace, you know.
yeah,
So, that's pretty incredible. You know, of all the stories I've heard over the years, you know, I didn't know where I believed them or not. But, you know, after you get around these creatures, for some reason, for me anyway, I don't know about everybody, but they seem to have a way of finding you. You don't ever go in the woods and just find a forest person or a Bigfoot. They let you see them if they want to. So they find me, and you know, Martin Groves seems to have that with the dogman creatures more than anybody I know. But
Yeah, the girl that I interviewed that went and lived up on Mount Shasta and had the experiences, she said that just they eased her into it. Like she would see them peek out from behind a tree,
yeah,
or maybe hear a little bit of noise or mumbling, and then gradually they came to trust her within that 5 months that she lived up there, and she saw them regularly after that. And but she
yeah,
said they
that's
had that ability. She said she would see them walk behind a tree,
mhm,
not come out the other side, go right
right.
to it, walk all the way around it. It's just not there anymore, kind of like you were talking about. So I
It's
believe, I don't know if it's portals or they have the ability to change their frequency. It's, just light. You look at the light, the spectrum of light, we only see a fraction of that right in the
sure.
middle. There's stuff on either end that's beyond our hearing and seeing and understanding. And I think they know either how to manipulate that, or it's just something they've learned to do, or maybe something that's born into them that they can
Well,
do that
just
as a
like
means of defense.
a camera system, for example. There's been plenty of people that I've watched something in the woods. They didn't know what it was, and when they took pictures of it and got home later and looked at it, they see a creature. They can't see it with their own eye. And that's why I don't like people criticizing people, especially in our group. We don't allow it, but you'll see people post a blurry picture or something that's kind of hard to see. But just because you don't see it, don't mean it's not there. So, I mean, there's people that the one who took the picture probably can see it a whole lot better than the one he's showing it to. So these things have a way of the best camouflage in the world. They can look just like a bush or a
Yeah,
tree. I don't know how they do it, but it's pretty
and
amazing.
I've heard stories of ones that could disguise themselves. Like I had a story from one guy that thought he was watching a stump, and he's like, "I've been down here a bunch of times, and I don't remember that stump ever being here." And
Right.
about the time he thought that, it turned into some kind of creature and got up and walked away. So
I believe
they
that.
and rocks. They can supposedly turn themselves into rocks.
Yeah.
Now I think it's the Algonquins, one of the tribes here in New England, and in the Bennington Triangle, there's stories of creatures that can disguise themselves as rocks, and when you step on it or step over it, they can open up and swallow you, and then get whatever substance they need out of you and spit you back out.
Right.
And there was one guy that was hunting up there, experienced hunter, and they found him in the woods, and he looked like he had been. This is what's in the official report. It looked like he'd been squeezed to death. So,
Yeah.
what's in the woods that can squeeze you to death? Well, maybe a Sasquatch, or maybe a rock creature that swallows you and spits you out. There's so much out there that we don't understand, Daryl, and that's what
Yeah.
fascinates me.
I think there's, if people would be a little more open minded to people who have seen things, it would make it a whole lot easier for the community, regardless of where you're on Facebook or a show like you have or anything. If they could not feel ridiculed, you would probably hear a lot more of these stories than you hear now.
Yeah, and I've had people thank me for, they say, I feel like it's okay to talk about this. I've carried this around with me, some people since childhood, and now they've got a place, a forum, a platform where they can talk about it with other
Right.
like-minded individuals or experiencers, and they don't feel ostracized. They're like they're going to be made fun of or ridiculed, and I like being able to provide that for people.
Well, you do a great job with it, Steve. You really
Thank you.
do. And I appreciate you. And I know there's so many others that do. That's pretty obvious with the followers you've got. So it's definitely a pleasure to share my experiences with you. And I've got a lot more, but it would take a lot of time to go into them. I'm just one of those kind of people that just happen to be around them. I don't know how that
Yeah.
happened,
Well,
but
and I've felt that way about the paranormal. For a long time, I thought that every house I've ever lived in was haunted to some degree. And then just in the last decade or so, I've come to realize that it's not so much the houses, it's me that's haunted. Because I've had roommates and stuff that lived there for years and nothing ever happened. And I move in and the place goes crazy with
oh, yeah,
paranormal activity
I've
and
heard
stuff.
of
So
that.
I think
I've
it's
heard of
me.
that.
And
Yeah, I've heard of that.
so
Yeah.
I'm
It seems
haunted,
like
but I wouldn't have it any other way.
It seems like some people are just maybe it's their I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the way they're made or their bloodline of I don't really know what causes that, but I definitely know that I'm different than a lot of people because of being around so many of these things. So, because I've got friends that's hunting the woods for 40 plus years, they've never seen anything. And maybe they have, but they didn't know it. But they don't
Yeah.
believe in them. They don't believe I'm lying. They just think I've said it's always I've seen a bear. Well, I've seen a lot of bears.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah, I've seen bears in the wild too, and the stuff I've seen that scared me and stuff, it was not a bear. I mean, I know what a bear is, and that's what
right.
people, well, was it a bear? Was it a deer? Was it this? No, I know what all those things look like, and this wasn't any of those things. And I think hunters are probably more aware, but even then, depending on what you're hunting, you may not be looking up. And I did a little experiment one time. I was up near Klingman's Dome. I climbed up a tree near a regular trail there, and I couldn't tell you how many people just walked right below me, kept right on both directions, had no idea that I was up in a tree watching them. I could have been anything. I could
They
have been
never
a big
seen you.
cat. I could have been a snake going to drop down on them. I could have been a human predator with
Yeah.
ill will. But no, just people are not very aware, and that's what happens. Like in a lot of these cases that we cover, where people just aren't paying attention. And there are places you get in one misstep, and that's it. There are not a
You
lot
know,
of second chances out there. Mother Nature is a harsh mistress, I heard somebody say.
I agree with that. And I would suggest not anybody, go hiking into the woods, deep in by themselves. The weird thing about the woods is when nighttime comes, it's a whole different world. It's
It
not
it
like the
really is.
daytime.
It's not at all like the daytime.
No.
There's things out there in the dark, and
Yeah.
I can attest to that. I've heard things, smell things, seen things that just aren't there in the daytime, and there's a whole different feeling. I mean, it's a palpable change when the sun goes down and you're out there. That's when you're really at the mercy of nature, I think, is when you're out there in the dark.
I've been pretty deep in by myself, and I don't do it anymore. But when I was first got into research, I would go in by myself quite often. Of course, it wasn't 10 miles, but I've been 10 miles in by myself, and I wouldn't do it now, but I've done it. But I don't think it's safe for anybody to do any of that type hiking, long periods of hiking by themselves. But it's pretty much proven that most of the people disappear, that they're all by themselves. Very few of them. There'll be
Yeah,
sometimes some of the
rarely
guys.
do you hear of a couple or a group of people going missing together. It's usually one person will break
Yeah,
off and I'm going to walk
yeah,
ahead, or I'm going to sit down. You guys, I'll catch up with you. And then
that's
they
right.
never see them again. They see them go around a curve in the trail and then
Yeah.
they're just gone and leave no trace. That's what I don't get. Like we were talking about earlier, a big cat or a bear or something like that. There's going to be forensic evidence. I've seen photos of cat attacks and bear attacks, and it's not pretty. I mean, there's blood, there's
Oh
tissue,
yeah.
there's torn clothing, the
Right.
ground cover is torn up, and there's been people missing where there was absolutely no shred of any kind of evidence.
Well, even some of the ones that when they do find them, to me, that's so weird. They'll find a lot of them in 2 or 3 inches of water.
Yep.
I mean, it makes no sense. So they'll find their shoes and their clothes in a little pile next to the creek bank, and they'll find them in just enough water that would be very difficult to drown in. And some of those autopsies, if you normally come back, they don't know how they died, or
Yeah.
there's not any proof of what
Not enough
killed
left
them.
to tell, or just other
No,
than maybe hypothermia or something like that. But again, and a lot of people die within just a short distance of the trail. Or
or they've got searchers and they've covered that area 10 times, and they'll find them there 2 days later in the same area they've covered.
yeah, that's almost like if there is something out there taking people, that it's taunting those search and rescue people.
It is. It
That's
really is.
happened time and time again where a person has been found in an area that was previously searched.
Right.
And I've participated in some search and rescue stuff back when I was much younger. And we walked almost not quite shoulder to shoulder, but you could almost reach out and touch the person next to you. You walk that close, it would be hard to miss unless, they were in a hole or covered
Oh
up with
yeah.
something.
You're talking about doing those grid searches. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, those seem to be pretty credible, and I don't know how many times I've heard that if they did find someone, it was in that area that they've been over 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. But
It's
then
almost like
again,
they
the
step into
obverse
a
of that,
portal.
I'll play devil's advocate here. Um, there's a lot of I've heard other search and rescue teams say that it's like finding a needle in a haystack. If we don't know where they even disappeared from exactly, sometimes they're not even sure what trail this people on. So that's why it's important to leave an itinerary either in your car or with somebody that will come look for you if you don't check in.
Most
But
definitely.
if they don't have, if you decide to go another route or take a different trail, they're not even going to know where to look. And
Nope.
these places, thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres. Some of them could be anywhere. And you look at like the drone footage and stuff like I use on my videos, show people on a little cliff face, and then that zooms out and keeps zooming out and zooming out and zooming out to the point that you can't even see the people. I mean, they're not even as big as ants. And then
Right.
imagine trying to go in a place like that and find a person. They could be
Well,
anywhere.
I
They could
mean,
be under a rock or behind a bush
true.
or
Well, if I was going to go solo, even with a group, I've gotten to the point where I try to carry one of those personal satellite beacons in
yeah,
case,
the personal locator beacons. I
yeah,
wouldn't go in
something
the
does
woods without
happen,
one. I don't
you
care if
know,
you're going for a day hike. Things can
right.
always go south and something can go wrong. And I've had people laugh at me, but I over prepared. If I was going out for a day hike, I had enough food and water to last me for a couple of days. I
Oh,
had a
yeah.
fire source. I had, where permissible, I had a firearm. I had flint and steel, something to start a fire with. And they're like,
Right.
you're just going for out for a hike in the state park. You're not doing the Appalachian Trail. I'm saying, but still, you never know. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Steve, there's so many cases of people who did come back that were missing that I've heard numerous stories of. They say they were hiking a trail or something in the woods that they're familiar with, and then all of a sudden they'd never seen the place they were before. They
Yeah,
were
and
just
that's
like
what
they were
that makes
somewhere
me
else.
think there's portals or something out there. I've covered cases like that and even interviewed people where I was hiking along and suddenly I realized all of a sudden I'm not on the trail. I look back behind me, I can't even see where the trail was I was on.
Right.
Now we're and people when you're lost, just part of human nature. I reckon you tend to walk in circles, and that just expends a lot of energy for nothing. So that's why they tell you if you are lost, stay put and wait for help, especially if you've got a way to let people know that
Sure.
you're
Yeah.
lost.
I
But
think it
I've
was.
often said if I ever get lost in the woods, I'm going to start the biggest forest fire they've ever seen.
Yeah, I think it was Mount Rainier. I could be wrong on this location, but I think that's where it was at. There was a gentleman who vanished there a couple. It's been 6 or 7 years ago, and they sent search teams in for days and weeks and couldn't find anything of him. And there was a journalist up there, like weeks after this happened, and she was hiking the same area that he was in, tried to find any evidence for herself, and she could hear this man yelling, "Help me." And it went on for hours. "Help me, help me." And she couldn't see anything. She couldn't figure out where he was yelling from, but by what she recounted, "I'm here, help me, somebody help me." And it was like he was in another dimension or something and couldn't find his way back. And finally, it died down, and she went and got help and told them, "Hey, listen, this guy's yelling, help me." And they searched and searched and never found anything. But it was like like I said, he was in some other type of dimension, and he could see them or could hear them, and he was yelling, "Help me."
Yeah, I
So,
covered a case one time. A woman had gone missing, and she could see the searchers. She couldn't get to them because of the brush and stuff where she was at, but she could see them. She was yelling, she was waving, and she said they just went right past her. So again, that points to something that what is that? I think there's portals or there's time slips or something that happens out there
oh,
that
it's
would
got to be.
account
There's
for
something we're
some of it.
not. There's something we don't understand, and I don't know what it is. But how many times have you heard about these kids? They'll find them on top of bluff that nobody could even climb. I
Yeah,
mean,
a
it would
couple of
be
years ago,
impossible.
covered that Riker Webb case. A kid wandered off, and they found him 2 miles away. He had to go
Yeah,
like up a mountain and down the other side. He was at a cabin out in their shed, sleeping or resting in a grass bag for the mower to catch grass, and they heard him talking in there, but apparently he was just talking to himself. And Daryl, the pictures when they brought him out of there, he's wearing these little footy pajamas. His feet aren't even dirty, and it had
Yeah,
rained and snowed.
yeah,
And
it
you're not
makes no
telling me
sense.
that kid walked for 2 miles in the
No,
mountains in those footy pajamas and didn't even
no,
get dirty.
makes no sense at all. It's hard to fathom. It really is. It really is. How could it be possible?
It's indeed a strange world out there, Daryl.
It
Well,
is.
I'm going to go ahead and cut this one short tonight, but I'd like to have you come back sometime and talk some
Oh,
more
sure.
with
I'd be honored to come back, Steve. Thank you so much for having me on, and I hope the audience enjoyed what I could tell them that I've experienced.
Oh, I'm sure they will, and I appreciate that exclusive there that you gave us. You said you'd never told that before on any of your friends knew it, but that you'd never talked about it on any show that you've been on. So,
Yeah,
um,
I've always been kind of leery of telling it. I was even shocked myself when I heard it, and because a lot of people won't believe that, but it happened, and it was so shocking to me at the time. It
yeah,
was really shocking when I heard that word.
yeah,
And
that's amazing. Well, tell the people where they can find you at.
You can find me at Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures, and I appreciate if you would support me and our group and join if you're not a member, and
Yeah, that's on
also
Facebook. Just
on
right there.
Facebook. Yeah,
I'll
and
put a link in the show notes.
if you wouldn't mind supporting my good friend Barton Unley and Humanoids, he has a new channel, and he's just a super most nice guy you ever meet. Barton
Yeah,
Unley, him and
Barton's a great
Letitia.
guy. Like I said, he wrote some stuff for me that I narrated and turned it into a project called Weird World that's on this channel, or actually on my YouTube channel. I forget where I'm at sometimes. I'm on the radio right now, but
Right.
that's up on my YouTube channel. But Barton's got some amazing stories too, and then
Oh,
in
just a
books,
super guy,
Inhumanoids is one of my
great
favorite books.
great friend, and Letitia and he both, and also Martin Grove's been my best friend 42 years. He's got a new book coming out. If you haven't seen his books, you ought to check them. They're amazing.
I will
Of his
check him
own
out, and
true
that just
encounters, and don't forget
reminded me.
Ron Moorhead if you want to hear anything
Yeah,
about the quantum or how these things can change the way they do. It's
yeah, I'm going to look that
fantastic
one up.
read.
I've got that in my Amazon cart. Thanks for the tip on that. And I'm going to talk to Barton and see if I can get him on here. He's a very entertaining individual. Have yet to meet the man. I was supposed to go to Josh Turner had a Dogman conference. The first
Right,
one
we were
was in
there.
Paris,
We were there
Tennessee.
in
Were you
Texas.
there?
Yeah,
Oh, you
me
went
and
to one in
Martin
Texas.
rode down together.
I didn't make it to either one. I was supposed to be at the first one in Paris, Tennessee, and I'd actually rented a hunting cabin in the land between the lakes area. So I found out I spoke at a UFO conference in San Francisco a few
Yeah.
years ago, and I found out that it's not a good idea to stay at the venue because I couldn't step outside my hotel room door. People wanting selfies or wanting me to sign this or that. I
Oh,
tried
I
to
don't
walk my
doubt that.
dog, and people
They
had
know who you
stories to
are.
tell me
So
and stuff. So yeah, I thought, well, I'll stay here and land between the lakes. I was looking forward to what would happen up there, but then the person that was going to drive me there came down with COVID, and I didn't get to make the trip. And then had a lot of other stuff going on this year. Couldn't go to the one in Texas, but maybe one day my wife and I will make it to one of those conferences.
yeah, it was, the first Dogman conference. Of course, Josh Turner, man. Josh, if you don't know Josh,
He's a good guy.
you got to meet Josh because Josh is a true, good-hearted individual. He doesn't always seem that way, but he really is. At his first conference, I've been to numerous conferences, but that was, and I've been fortunate enough to be a speaker at quite a few of them. But he's just incredible. Josh is, and he also. I'm in chapter 4 of his book, Bigfoot Encounters, along with several other people. But he's really he has some great conferences. I'd say that the first Dogman conference he had in Land Between the Lakes was the best conference I've ever been to. Of course, that was the first time Martin had finally broke down and told his story on the show, Martin Groves, on the stage. And, just I appreciate everyone. And Joe and Jesse do a lot of Hell Bent Holler. These guys are in the woods. I don't know anybody's boots on the ground like they are. They go in the LBL by themselves in the middle of the night and just walk for miles.
They're braver than I am.
Yeah, they're pretty brave. We've had some incredible encounters there. Me and
Yeah, but
Bart.
that's the best way to do it. I mean, that's you can hopefully have a chance encounter, but I think if you get out there and look for it, then you're more likely to. Maybe, I don't know, not
Well,
always.
your chances of encountering something are going to increase if you put yourself close to them. So, you got to
Yeah,
at least be out there. You can't just sit in a chair and expect to see one. But,
yeah.
but
Well, Daryl, again, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'll put a link in the show notes. I'll see if I can get Barton to join us on here. But thanks again for all that you
hey,
do
thank
there
you
with your
again too,
search.
and I appreciate you letting me plug my friends and people. And I'm very honored to be on your show, Steve. I'll be glad to come back again.
All right, absolutely.
Thank
And
you
I
so
think
much.
listeners here on Clyde Lewis's Ground Zero Radio Network will really appreciate the stories you had to tell and will ask for you to come back. So you have a good evening and stay blessed, Daryl. Thanks again.
You too. Thank you, Steve.
I'm Steve Stockton. You've been listening to everything out there on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. I'll see you a little further on down the trail. Tell your animals I said hi. Good night, everybody.